Hello, everyone. Namaste and shalom. We are gathering here today for a special session with Stephanie Quirk, following our reading of Light on Pranayama by BK Iyengar Guruji. And I'm very happy to have Stephanie here with us. So I want to say a few words. For those of you who don't know Stephanie, he is internationally recognized as not just Iyengar Yoga teacher, but perhaps a leader in Iyengar Yoga therapeutics. She spent over 20 years living, studying, and working directly with the Iyengar family at the Ramamani Iyengar Memorial Yoga Institute in Pune, India. She has assisted in medical classes and deepened her understanding of āsana and Prāṇāyāma as tools for healing and, I would say, transformation. Her teaching is known for its clarity, precision, and warmth as she guides students step by step from the outer, more visible actions of the body into the more subtle layers of breath, perception, and our mind. So thank you, Stephanie, very much for being with us here today. And my first question for you was about how Guruji emphasized that pranayama should grow out of a stable base in asana. And we read it in the book, and we discussed it. So how do you assess when a practitioner's asana practice has matured enough to begin pranayama practice beyond just time on the mat?
Yeah. This is really, Guruji has the insight to see that in people. So, in the absence of someone like Guruji being present, of course, now he's not present because he has passed, but to have somebody of that caliber, we don't have somebody of that caliber. So, what has happened within the system is kind of verifiable signposts to say, this is what constitutes readiness for pranayama. And often they differ. Somebody else would say, oh, it's 6 months of practice, or oh, it's 1 year of practice, or when they have done head and shoulder stand, or so it's in people trying to be able to make that assessment. It's people who don't necessarily have the insight that Mr. Iyengar had. He could see somebody and just look at how they practice, and he would know whether they were mature enough. Now, it's not necessarily according to a particular attainment of particular poses, but there is a rough guide in that. If you take the way that within Iyengar Yoga, the student is introduced to poses and taken through a course of poses right up to the point where they are introduced and they are doing inverted poses. That means that they're to have gotten that far, no matter how long it takes, does mean that the nervous system has gotten to that level. The circulatory system hasn't found any obstacles. The respiratory system has been touched through all angles and places within the respiratory system. Is, in other words, to get to where you are doing inverted poses means you have touched pretty evenly all the other categories of poses. So it's pretty much this. Did they do a head and shoulder stand? Is the guideline. Some people, I think I started yoga and did my first headstand within a month and a half. And that wasn't the usual way. It was because I was going to drop-in classes, and that's what my friend did. So I did it too. And that's how I came to do inverted poses. So it's kind of quite a haphazard, organic way of coming to an inverted pose. The funny thing is that I came kind of backwards to yoga from meditation. And so I was quite used to spending long periods of time in a seated position, maintaining a kind of equalness in that seated position, maintaining stillness in that seated position without too much unnecessary duress or restlessness, because I had been practicing meditation for quite some time. Now, that's just an odd thing for me personally. I personally had an interest in pranayama practice because I went to my very first Iyengar Yoga class, and that pretty much blew me away. And so I managed to get back to do another one to see if I had the same result. Yes, that happened. Um, and I was so inspired by this new thing, this new love that I had, that I was going to buy Light on Yoga. I was going to get a copy of this book by this man, Light on Yoga. The bookshop didn't have one, much to my disappointment. It didn't have one, but they had this. So I got that. And I knew how to do digital pranayama by the end of the week. It's on every bookshop shelf. It's there if you want to have a look in. So I would say that, yes, I picked up, I'm just going to actually share a thing with you with my copy of Light on Pranayama. It's signed by BKS Iyengar. And which I feel very fortunate to have that particular signature. The thing is that I could get the book and I could do digital pranayama by the end of the week. And in some ways, that was really important because I was having this experience of really opening up to things. Okay, I could do digital pranayama. The reason why was because that book is full of very good explanations and photographs that made everything clear. That didn't mean I knew the practice of pranayama. That didn't mean that what I was doing was practicing pranayama. I was a child. And I opened the book and it's like, oh, I want to do that one. And that's what I did. I had a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, but it held me in there to go on to to open the page of the next class. Within, I think by the time I first got to Pune in 91, 92, I was a 5-year-old yoga practitioner. I think now you have to be a bit older. Yeah, I was only 5 years old at that stage and encouraged to go by my teacher. So that was my path. That was my way in. It was only really that when I got to Pune and got to be not so much, to be honest with you, not so much by the book, but being under the eye of the Iyengars, that I started to imbue what it was to do practice, no matter what the discipline, what it was to take on practice. And so that then included pranayama. So in some ways, the maturity to actually isn't really to do with your accomplishment of a pose. It isn't really to do with the duration of years or lung capacity. My lung capacity is not great. Yeah, and that's because I have an immune disorder. I have had rounds of interstitial pneumonia. I got fibrotic changes in my lungs. That doesn't mean I can't do, because it's not about fuller breath. It's actually about that. You find this reference in, I think, in Light on Pranayama, the chapter that begins preparing the mind for pranayama. He quotes a very important, and the yogic world, very important quote, which comes from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the second chapter of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the second verse, talks about the connection between the mind and the breath. Wherever the breath goes, the mind will go there. Whatever state the breath is in, the mind will be in that state. Whatever state the mind is in, the breath will be in that state. So there's this the practice of pranayama is this interaction between really awareness and the breath. I would say it is the maturity in practice is really when the student is really opening up to the fact that it is practice that is informing, that is in their life. That that practice is the important undertaking that's important for pranayama, for getting to pranayama practice. It's not classes, though often it is through attending of classes that regularly going back to class is really good if a studio has availability of students being able to practice without being led by a teacher. So they come and they start to examine what it is to do this thing to yoga. It feels to me that's important. And yes, getting the body physiologically, nervous system, with all the systems, hormonal system, everything ready, I would say, yes, the head and shoulder stand's a good marker. But the art of pranayama is going to be much more so it's, not so much the science, but the art. I'm not sure if it's in Light on Pranayama, he defines pranayama as being that which it is an art, it is a science, and it gives meaning and purpose to your life. That's important. That it's bringing meaning and purpose to your life. Then the student really wants to go with pranayama practice. There's nothing wrong with lying down and being taught Ujjayi Vilona. It's a very good starting point. Yeah, as a gauge, if you're a teacher and it's kind of like, should I be introducing pranayama? There are stages, there are levels that you can just work with the lying down with the student, the lying down Ujjayi 1, 2, 3, 4 has got so much contained in it. That interaction between what shifts between Ujjayi 1 and 2, and an even bigger percentage of shifts that happens between Ujjayi 2 and 3. That these changes that happen, if the student's awareness is developing, is key for them going into pranayama as a practice.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. So you're talking, if I understand correctly, about different levels of pranayama practice and also about the technicalities. Some can start earlier than what is prescribed. Some are not ready.
No. Yeah. The thing is, there's no fixed map for it. That even in amongst the community of teachers, there's no one settled argument about what it is. So I start to think about what qualitatively, what is the student's approach to the whole practice that's important.
So would it be the ability to sit for long, or would it be the ability to be in Shavasana and
both? You can do the whole practice. You can do the Ujjayis and Vilomas. You can begin to learn with the kumbakas even in a line practice. That you can't really do digital pranayama in a line position.
So there is no one thing that
Yeah,
would
yeah.
tell us if we
I
are
thi-
ready
I
or not.
think on an individual level, there isn't really a fixed thing whereby you'd sort of say you're not allowed to do it until there, because the book is on every bookshop shelf. There's nothing to stop you if you have an interest. Now, the question is it's not really for the student, it's for the teacher. It's for the teacher to actually decide for themselves, if I am to be responsible for all of these people, for a group of people, if I'm to be responsible for them, when should I say to do this? When shall I introduce this? So it's not I did once point out to Mr. Anger this fact that, but if people are not allowed to do something unless there was certain certificate level, what about the fact that all the books are on the bookshelf? So the thing
What did
is,
he say?
the question is more about the responsibility for the teacher, more than some particular fixed line in mind of the student. Now, if I was to kind of guess, if somebody sort of said, one of the problems I face is recently I had a student that came to me who was an experienced Iyengar Yoga student, but who had developed a particular condition in their lungs to do with spores or bacteria in the soil. And it was affecting her lungs. And it was kind of like her question was, what pranayama shall I do? Because my lungs are affected. Actually, not a good idea if the lungs are not well. It's not a good idea to apply pranayama to those lungs at that time when they're not well. It's like if there's a fever, it's not a time, no matter how advanced you are. But there are conditions, there are contraindications as to when really you shouldn't actually practice pranayama, even if you're very experienced, even if you are doing inverted poses. So it's kind of like it can only ever be a very general rule. And I would say, in my experience, to all the things I've heard, and especially when I think about the pranayama classes and the pranayama week, often I would be in the medical class assisting in Pune, and even the medical classes would be taken through a pranayama. Some of those medical students had not done any classes and were not doing independent head and shoulder stand, but they were ill. They were facing they were facing in their lives illness. And Gita would come, particularly on that last week, and lead the medical students who were not well, who had various conditions. She would lead them through, can I say, pranayama, or much more the connection between the head and the heart. Quite deep, not technical, more heartfelt is the way that she led them. They weren't students. They hadn't done a head and shoulders stand. You see what I mean? Qualitatively, it's more important than there being technically a point. It's that. If I'm faced with a large number and people say, oh, we would like you to teach us pranayama, I will swing around and say, are they doing head and shoulder stand yet? Kind of a baseline. I need to know that because I'm going to be taking responsibility for, it might be in a big workshop where there are, 30, 40 people. I've actually got this situation coming up when I'm going to go and teach in Asia. there can be a lot of students there in that room. I don't know them. We don't speak the same language. I've got to make a quick decision. They want to be introduced to pranayama. I will ask them, did they do a head and shoulders stand yet? But in all my experience in Pune, and I think about those times that Gita would come and teach them some pranayama practice in a lying position. Yeah. They were the ordinary folk from Pune. The householders from Pune, they weren't yoga students. They were there because of various ailments, but Gita would come and still teach pranayama. So you see the situation. It's not that there's a fixed thing. It's here, you can go and there you stop. It's not quite like that. Sorry to not give you such a kind of like a tick mark on the right box.
This is exactly why we wanted to have this session, because what we learned from the book can go so far. And since Iyengar Yoga is a living teaching tradition, we have to talk with the living teaching teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very curious about what's that big leap between Ujjayi 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3. And basically, what would be the difference between Gita leading people to notice the relation between the head and the heart and Ujjayi 1?
We can't, the second one with Gita, I guess this was my impression, was how much he touched their heart, their emotions in a way that it wasn't going into darkness, it was bringing light. But Gita is not here, so we can't really answer that question. And it's my impression of being in that room with her. I was surprised. It was like, I realized she's not teaching them technically. She's bringing quality into their lives. She's giving them a gift. And it's that quality of heart more than the correct or incorrect way, or do this for so long and do that for so long. Yeah. Because at times in the class when she had students that were supposedly well trained and well taught, yes, she would be quite definite about when the kumbhaka would start and what state it was you would release, and so on and so forth. So that, to a certain extent, there was a sequence to the stages of things, and there wasn't allowed to be any kind of like shortcuts. Students do these shortcuts in pranayama quite a lot, actually. It's part of the problem with teaching. There's a gap. In teaching pranayama, the student will follow you and will realize, have heard the whole story from outset to ending. And there's a tendency, it's a natural thing, it's not a sin, it's a natural thing. The student will try and hurry up to get to the end of the story, to complete the sequence of pranayama. Even if in actual fact their natural breathing pattern or their nervous system's capacity would actually be slower than that. They hurry to catch up, to be up with what the teacher is voicing. It's a difficult situation as a teacher, knowing that some students need to take more ordinary breaths in between, maybe in between a cycle of the Viloma inhalations. They need to, at the end of a cycle of Viloma inhalations, then actually have some normal breaths before they repeat that. They don't necessarily just go straight on to another Viloma cycle of inhalations. And it is sometimes for students, they are ready to go on ahead, to go on to the next cycle, to come straight from one cycle and to go smoothly into the next cycle. To get a student to literally honor their nervous system, which is what will get disturbed if they go too fast or too slow. It's actually the nervous system that's going to, it's not just the breath, but it's literally startled. If you get breathless and you go too fast beyond your capacity, it startles the nervous system. So it's in that there's a training. Whether being able to accomplish the head and shoulder stand gives you that training. I think it's in the pranayama that that whole level, much more subtle level of learning is undertaken. Yeah. And the difference between Ujjayi 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll need to come on the course. It's a practical thing. And it's very clear. It's very clear when you see it. Oh, yeah, is what happened. Yeah.
So
It's
please
not a
tell us
secret.
more about the course in a few
Oh,
minutes.
Yeah, sure.
When you just described different pranayama techniques or just pranayamas, you did a distinguishment that we also do when we talk about the book. And what we encounter in classes, it's not only whether we lie down or sit, as a seated pranayama being more advanced, but that there is Viloma and Ujjayi on one side, and then there is the digital pranayamas and Kumbhaka on the other side, seen as advanced.
That's nuts. That's really nuts because you can do Ujjayi lying down 1 to 4 in a very, very refined, subtle way. So it's much more that connection between the mind and the breath that's in, Guruji, it's for me, it's a very loud quote. And it's not just because that's what is said in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and that's what gives it authority. It's because it would be quoted again and again in Mr. Iyengar's written work and Gita's. It's certainly at the opening of preparing the mind for pranayama. And it's key. It's that generally in the circle of yoga writers, teachers of the past, of the ancient past, as well as the present, it's deemed that Svatmarama is the author of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's thought that really that was Svatmarama's greatest contribution, was that one verse, that second verse on pranayama. The fact that connection between the mind and the breath. So it's referred to as being Svatmarama's greatest contribution. It wasn't his only one, but that was possibly his greatest important one. So that's where it begins in the Yoga Sutra. Bhaya Abhyanta Stamba Vritti Desikala Sukshma. The whole thing, Bhaya Abhyantara Stamba Vritti, the whole of pranayama is Bhaya Abhyantara, exhalation, inhalation, or retention movements. When you look at Surya Vedana, it is still Bhaya Abhyantara Stamba Vritti. It is still those 3 movements. Now, in the next chapter, this is when the advanced bit comes, really, because even Nadi Shodhana is still Bhaya Abhyantara Stamba Vritti. If you're in that, for instance, in Nadi Shodhana, you exhale for the right nostril, inhale for the right nostril, exhale for the left nostril, inhale for the left nostril. There's a kumbhaka in between. There's a kumbhaka as you change the fingers from one nostril over to the other. It's got all the movements in it. All of them has all the movements. They're comprised of different patternings. It's not that is more advanced than Ujjayi 1, 2, 3, 4 in a line position. It depends the quality of mind, remembers what Marama's term. It's that quality of mind that comes with the breath that is talking about the refinement of it, not the advancement, but much more the refinement of it. But the verse in the Yoga Sutra, after by the definition of or the constituents of pranayama practice, it says, but there's a fourth one. And that fourth one really is talking about the movement of prana, not the movement of the breath. It is much more a form of the kumbhaka, but it's said to be a self-evolving state of, it's not retention, nothing's held, nothing's released. But it's really remaining in that in-between state, and that's named, that would be advanced. So in the Life on Pranayama, one of the things that comes in Light on Pranayama that doesn't get talked about that much, it does a bit, and it gets a lot of kind of news, and that is what is known as Shakti Chalana practices. And Shakti Chalana practices are essentially chala. If you go to Pune, you hear the word chal. Chal means go. Let's go. Chal. So they say that quite quickly, and it means to go. And Shakti Chalana is moving or getting the energy to move, to go, to move. And there's a lot of these kind of things that get a lot of notoriety that he doesn't bring strongly in the book. So to a certain extent, what is coming in the book is a really solid foundation, and it is a very good book because it is applicable, readable, applicable for everyone. Yoga is one of those sayings that is often quoted as yoga is for all, yoga is for everybody. There are practices that are advanced, that are not in the book, that are talked about perhaps within yogic circles. They're the realm of practice for a practitioner who has become a sadhaka. They really are seeking something specific that has grown from their own evolution. Yeah. Now, what is given in Mr. Iyengar's work is, it's not that it's base, because it's actually very refined. When I look at the Yoga Sutra that talks about Vaya Abhyantara Stamba Vritti, according to time, place, according to subtlety and refinement and measurement, all of these qualities, everything is there. Everything is in Light on Yoga. And it's actually available to anyone who wants to undertake it. So it's very difficult to talk about it in terms of kind of levels or hierarchical levels. Because for the yoga practitioner, you're only ever going to practice where you are. That means that when you are not yet practiced, you will do a not yet practiced practice. And it's only you who will take you to where you are actually doing an evolved practice. And yeah, I don't know, does that work? Does that help you to sort that out?
Yes, because you're talking about the quality of things and not about the technicality or the categories. And it's very refreshing.
Good. And, the way that I think within the, one of the brilliant things that Mr. Iyengar did was he gave a template for learning. And it wasn't that he gave a template for already well-trained practitioners. He gave a template for a person who wanted to learn and wanted to undergo that process of learning. His system of learning from the very beginning, within, you get reference to it within the associations of Iyengar Yoga, that system that the various levels are brought up through is absolutely sound. It will take you through to those areas where you are, what can I say, experiencing your own subtle breath. You're experiencing the subtle effects found in the mind, the effects that are coming to the heart from practicing the method within Iyengar Yoga. It's the extraordinary thing that he did was he made it applicable for everybody. And in a funny kind of way, this is bringing the possibility of health and well-being to all. There is a saying in India called "for the welfare of all, for the welfare of many, Baujan Hite," for the welfare of many. And that's what he brought. That's what he brought in asana practice, because he really took yoga, the whole practice of yoga, as well as the understanding of the philosophy of it, out of the particular ashrams and just gave it to people. He just opened it out for everybody to benefit from. And everybody can follow a path of that is beneficial by following through what it is that is outlined within the system of Iyengar Yoga. It's almost as though I can remember having conversations with him when he started to really do work for his village, Belur. He really wanted to do fundraising for Belur. And he talked, I had had some conversations with him in the library, and we had these conversations that would end up where we were saying, yes, education is the main thing. Educate. So he was setting up primary schools and secondary schools and tertiary kind of like education systems where people would be trained with vocational. The women would have the possibility of learning nursing. These people from these remote villages had never dreamt of such a thing. So he did that for his village on Belur. He did that with yoga. Now, he trained himself with T. Krishnamacharya. He was in touch with really a practitioner who had learnt from Ramakrishna Mohan Brahmachari up in the Tibetan mountains. And so he would have learnt and had knowledge and passed down quite a lot of extraordinary practitioners. Mr. Iyengar got the fundamental, essential axis of the human being, that it had ascension and it had expansion. And he took that template and took it through poses. From the vertical line of Tadasana, every pose is an unraveling from Tadasana. Every pose has its measure, its alignment back to the line of Tadasana. And the same thing. So there was this patterning, there was this expansion of awareness, the embodied awareness, through the system he took people through asana practice, starting at Tadasana. You go from Tadasana and you take Tadasana as a single axis, and you take the horizontal axis. When you do that with the body, you've done that with the awareness and with consciousness. So you've got the vertical axis, horizontal axis, everything, all the asanas are built on that. The same with pranayama. The whole of pranayama practice is built on Baya, Abhyanto, Stamba, Vritti. All of those movements. And these are essential to humankind. We all have exhalation, inhalation, and a pause as we hold our breath, because something just gave us a thought. Whether it's intentional or unintentional, there are unintentional kumbhakas. That is what is in the chapter afterwards. So it is an essential of our human nature, Baya, Abhyanto, Stamba movements. Vritti means movement. Baya is an exhalation. Abhyanto is inhalation. Stamba is the pause, the stillness. Movements. That is the genetic foundation. The whole practice of pranayama Tadasana is the genetic beginning of the whole practice of asana. He worked that out. When you study these books, one of the interesting things, and I hope you really kind of move on to it, is often people want to do Nadi Shodhana practice, yeah? Best way to study Nadi Shodhana practice is take the chapter on Nadi Shodhana and work it backwards. Go backwards, look at the pattern. Because when you look at Nadi Shodhana, to get there, you have to have learnt Surya and Chandra Bhairana. To get there, you have to have learned Anuloma Pratiloma patterns. So all of these are actually, it's like the bits of Nadi Shodhana are learnt, and then click, it's all put together. The whole book is about Nadi Shodhana. Actually, it's not. It's very interesting because sometimes things happen within our system, and so they become very important. And often something else that's always been there is missed. Yeah. And I just noticed it when I picked up this book. It's thing like, oh, where is that quote? I'm going to find out. And I was trying to remember where the quote from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika came in. But what I realized was, oh, that's right. There's two parts to this book called Light on Pranayama. The first part has got a lot of sections in it. Essentially, it's a book with two parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 2 is dhyana. It's meditation. So that's a context in which pranayama is happening. It's a context. The last part, Light on Pranayama, is dhyana. And he refers that to as beatitude, beatitude. It's a strange English word. Yeah. So it's kind of like, well, this is the context of pranayama. We've come from our asana practice. Pranayama exists within the context of meditation practices. So it really puts a lot of relevance out to that quote from Swatmara. It's this connection of the mind and awareness to the breath, more than actually kind of like there's a lot of technical stuff in it. You can really refine it, really get into the fine movements of the finger, the way that you can move the breath from an inner space to an outer space, or from an outer space to an inner space, and you control that to what edge of the fingertip you're pressing. So there's a lot of detail to go into. There's a lot of taking your awareness really into that subject if you're practicing along with it, and then you go, whoa, you realize that what he just led you through is repeated again and again, the same pattern again and again and again, all the way through up to Nadi Shodhana. It's a very interesting book to read. For me, one of the most interesting things is to see the patterns of learning that you go through, you get taken through if you follow his books. It's the same as the pattern or the heart's geometry and the brain's geometry that you get taken through in asana practice. Where the body expands, where the body is aligned with the center. Okay, maybe I'll keep quiet. For me, it's fascinating. For me, it's fascinating. It's what has me. It has me kind of going. I sort of think, okay, I think I'm going to teach such and such tonight. Oh, did you know? I'm like, good heavens, I didn't know he did that. And then, oh, okay. So I suddenly will discover something that he had written. It's like a message because, I spent 20 years in the library doing his typing work. So when I read something like that in one of his books or an Asabala Yoga Mala, it's a bit like getting a message from him. He'd be in the desk down the end of the room. It's like through his book, it's like he'd say something and like, oh, okay. There it is. Yes. And he would laugh because I hadn't seen that after all these years.
Could I ask you about how when you teach, and you mentioned that you have experience with meditation and even before coming to yoga, and you just now mentioned dhyana, which is of course in the book. So I'm thinking about what could you tell us about your or a teacher's inner state or stance when one is guiding others in pranayama? What should be the attitude?
Yeah. This is why, where for me in Australia, we started this session at 8:30 at night. And it was because actually at my 7 at night, this is my time, Sydney time, yeah. At my 7 at night, I actually did an hour's class with a group from Taiwan because we were doing it translated for the Mandarin speaking people. We did 2 channels for the actual speech. So I kind of came out of that. And the reason why I didn't, so I said, yeah, we can do this talk at 8:30 after I've done the teaching. And it's because I'm talking, I'm reminiscing, I'm reflecting on past and text and memory and this kind of thing. I can't teach the subject at this time of the night. It's too late for me because I need to be, my nervous system needs to be pretty calm. I need to be in a really strange position where I am quite calm myself in my own state. And because I have to teach it to the screen, to the audio, etc. I have to watch the students every now and then. On the Zoom, it's not, I don't tend to get into correcting individuals much unless I see they haven't got it and that's the wrong arm. I'll correct that kind of thing. But I really need to be in the room to look at people's position, that sort of thing. But I need to have a strong recollection of my own experience of doing that, my own memory in the tissue with the breath, with the feeling of the breath, inhaling and exhaling, hailing. But then again, I have to be on Aya Abhyanta Sanghaviti. I have to be in touch with those things, those fundamental things, in order to be able to teach to the student. Now, it's not that I can kind of like practice along with them, because I have to think a bit about the sequence, what they have just done, whether I've been doing a lot of strong inhalation kumbakas. I mean, if close the program now, you'll just go out of the room. That's spinning away. Yeah. I can't, that's somewhat rather irresponsible. I have to balance it. I have to bring them into balance at the end of it. I have to feel the rhythm for that coming back into balance. I have to think about the sequence of where I'm taking the student, where I want to take the student through, and what is going to be the cultivating steps. In other words, they're going to be doing the practice. So I have to be teaching them through steps that will cultivate their breath, nervous system, mind appropriate to where we're going. Can't do that at 8:30 at night. Right now it's 9:22. I'll just get to the point where I'm starting to giggle. I'm tired. I'll just start giggling. You think it's crazy. No, I have to be in a state ready to be in touch with what that experience is and quite judiciously use it. The other thing is, one that is quite interesting because I've been in Pranayama intensive led by BKS Iyengar. He did a series of them all in there, like 96, 97, 98, can't quite remember. Everyone would go up to Rishikesh, we'd do a week by the river practicing yoga, and then we'd come back to Pune and he'd do a week's pranayama intensive. And I was fortunate enough to be on one of those. So I watched, so I got to be present while he was teaching that pranayama intensive. I've also been in the room a lot. For 20 years, I've been in the room with Gita as she teaches pranayama. Well, more specifically, actually, the times when I was an assistant. Because to be honest with you, you don't really know what they're doing because you've got your eyes closed. So who knows what they do. But I remember actually watching Prashant, and um, and I saw what Prashant was doing as he taught. And it reminded me of a story that Gita had related to when T. Krishnamacharya would come to Pune sometimes, had come a couple of times to visit Sundara, who was DKS Iyengar, and Guruji's children, which was Gita, Vanita, Prashant, Uchita, Savita. And all the kids would be taken for pranayama by T. Krishnamacharya. And apparently, so you've got these kids all sitting on beds, cross-legged, and he was sitting on another one. And apparently he'd sit there and he would teach them with his eyes closed. That clearly tells me what he was doing. He was totally in touch with his own practice in order to be able to teach them. He closed his eyes, and then there's this always amusing thing, because this is Gita's writing with this an account of these sessions where T. Krishnamacharya would teach these kind of like 10, 12-year-olds. And she said he would close his eyes tight, and then all of a sudden he'd fling his eyes wide open, and he would catch the themes dealing with their eyes open. Because he told everyone to keep their eyes closed, and these kids were there staring back at him, and he accused them of stealing. But there he was with his eyes closed tight, being in touch with his own practice. I mean, that's what I kind of do. Sometimes it's just kind of take a breath in, close my eyes. The memory would rise up, and then from there you can teach. But the thing is that I realized that I had that must have had a big impression on Prashant, because that is often how Prashant would teach. He'll sit on the platform, and he too would sit there in the institute, eyes closed, teaching. Then all of a sudden, his head will come up, and he'll see and look around the room and see what everyone was doing. In other words, he had to go in. To teach pranayama, you have to go in. The lucky thing is, if you're teaching pranayama, is all the students in front of you have got their eyes closed. They won't necessarily know if you've got your eyes closed. It's just inherent in that art form. They're going to, well, they should have their eyes closed, either that or the little thieves are stealing. Yeah, you've got to be in touch with it.
Thank you for sharing that story. You mentioned in the beginning of your answer how you teach on Zoom. And in the last few years, we have become accustomed to Zoom. But prior to that, and of course, whoever the teacher here was taught how to teach in person. So you just touched upon that when you teach on Zoom, how do you correct and what can you observe? And when you're in person, what can you see? So I'd like to ask you how your teaching has changed when you teach on Zoom, and then if you could tell us a bit about your course as well.
You know, to some degree, teaching on Zoom, I really quite enjoy it. And one of the things is that partly to do with the fact that when you practice pranayama, you are sitting quite still. And when you sit in front of a computer, you are, once again, just sitting, which is quite different to being in a classroom where there is a lot more getting up, walking around, walking over to that person, maybe making an adjustment or something. But you can only do that for so long. You can't walk around forever adjusting people. Essentially, for the student, no matter how good or bad their poses are, they will go into their space of quietude. There's a certain point at which you can't just go and adjust them because it's a bit shocking for them. Yeah. It's a bit kind of disturbing for them. So there's a certain point. So I would say that for myself, you know, in teaching in a classroom, the thing that comes up stronger is in visually seeing the student and what they are doing. And when teaching on Zoom, the explanation of what they need to do has become more refined. Because to reach across that space, this is, I kind of like, I know that in the opening verses, the invocation to Sri Patanjali, he's talked about as being a yoga practitioner, an Ayurveda, and a grammarian. Grammar is important to teach. Your language is important to teach. I'm not talking about the volume or whether you can teach it, your voice is a good singing voice or anything like that. But your dialogue, your expression, it was a thing that really hit me in the head when I had been in Pune pretty solidly for 10 years as a student. I only used to leave, and I would always only go away for about 3 or 4 months to get another visa and then go back to India. And for about 10 years, that's what I did. Then I started traveling and teaching. And I can remember I had gone away for a whole month. I was in the UK and I was teaching some workshops and got through that. And of course, then went back to India and walked in. And I think the very first class, it happened to be a Wednesday night medical class, I had just turned up. And I walked into that hall. And the first thing, and it really shook me, was the emotional quality and tone that the Iyengars used to teach students with. They are technicians par excellence. But I suddenly realized that this heart, pouring the heart to them, was so important, imploring them, guiding them in a way that is going to bring a better quality, and the emotional tone, firing them when they needed to be collected and corrected and brought into one being. That quality, that tone, and the language that you use, the pictures that you bring with the language, I find Zoom is working on that much stronger because it's your main tool. You can't go across there and adjust them. You're going to have to use language to get through, and it's important.
Thank you. Could you tell us a bit about your course?
The course, yeah. Yeah, the course, great. So we've got a 5-week, not a 5-week, a 5-session course. And through it, what I'm hoping to open up to the student is this whole aspect of my favorite quote from Swatmarama, this connection in which awareness of the breath. And I intend on background to leading through the basics. So this first one is going to be just with the basics. Just to be clear, the basics do not suggest a lower level. It's what I consider as building blocks for you to be able to. Mr. Iyengar once said that for the first year when he tried to do pranayama practice, he fell asleep. He would get up early in the morning, and it took him a year to get out of that just dropping off, just becoming dull. He had been, he's a very hardworking man, and he used to at that stage, used to do a lot of jumpings, a lot of those jumping between poses. And it was only around about the time that he was writing Light on Yoga, that was published in 1966, that he started to actually change that. And it was because there's a story about how his wife, Ramamani, used to actually get up even earlier than him to make him coffee so that he could have a coffee. Now, it wasn't coffee in order to have that kind of innovating drug. It was actually because they're South Indians, and South Indians drink coffee. They don't tend to drink tea. They drink coffee. So she would get up and make him coffee to help him with his pranayama practice, because it was very difficult to move to not just go into that kind of slightly dull, soporific, tamasic state when working with something refined and subtle as the breath. So I've found over the years, it's taken me a while to sort of develop ways of actually trying to teach the subject to people so as to open out their interest, to just open doors to their curiosity, to kind of like show them. I usually have to tell them, after letting them go through some stages, I'll recall to them what happened. Do you remember at the beginning? It was like this. Did you notice when I said to now move on to here? Did you notice what you did just before that? Because all these things start to alert us to what is going on in this breathing process. So this is what I was talking about, the movement, especially when we're doing Ujjayi 2. I'm going to let you in on the secret. Yeah. When we do Ujjayi 2, we're working with prolongating the depth and the profundity of an exhalation. It's a release, it's an excavation, It's penetrating down through the layers and layers of the abdomen. Each cycle is longer, fuller, deeper exhalation. The next phase, next Ujjayi 3, is to actually start to work with your inhalations. So what I do is I point out to the student to do that long, deep exhalation. Did you notice the inhalation we did to get that long exhalation? Because these things, we follow the teacher, we do that long, slow exhalation. Then I say, just notice next time you do the exhalation, you're going to do a particular inhalation to prepare for that. What do you do? And these I use a whole series of these to sort of wake up to the student what it is that goes on. Now, all of these things I've learned from Pune because Mr. Iyengar over the years had to come out of that tamasic state and start to see, and he started to work it out. He started to work it out and he started to be able to teach with it. But this is, he often would say to us, the thing is, it took me 60 years to learn that, and I'm teaching it to you in 6 weeks. So it is basically in the course, I will be opening out a lot of these things. I'll try and guide the students to what happens when you lie over just a couple of folded blankets. What happens when you lie over a couple of bricks? Now, it's very easy to say, ouch, the bricks prick you in the back, in the shoulder blades, but actually something else happens inside. It's an incredible change. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Da, 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 da. Yeah, so I'm bringing a lot of these things in as the kind of the base, actually showing you how the breath changes. What are the things that we do that can radically alter the quality of the breath? So that's what we're going to be doing for 5 sessions, whilst also doing Ujjayi, Viloma, and Kumbhaka, same thing.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm inviting now participants to ask. Either you can write in the chat or open your mic and ask. Yes, Vedanta.
Hi, thank you, Stephanie, for that. Very interesting, very inspiring, and very intriguing, and very conjuring up a taste for wanting to do the past. Anyway, have you got a regular yoga practice that you practice on a regular pranayama sadhana or anything of that nature on a consistent basis? Or if you do or not, I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
You're not going to tell me what it is, or no, you don't have to say what you. No, you don't have to say. You have it like a daily or a monthly, or is it a practical practice, or is it an emotional or mental practice, or?
Sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's like, here I am again. Sometimes it's like I just lie back and start on a bolster, usually, it's just like everything comes. I make a beginning. I just take the awareness to the breath, coming on to the breath with awareness and staying there evenly is quite more substantial to what it was 15, 20 years ago when I did suffer from the mind coming through and so on and so forth. Yeah, this there is something in coming back to the practice, in coming back to the practice, in returning, in returning.
Even after years
Returning.
and years, you know.
Yeah, the more years, the better. Yeah, it seems to be that it's the years. It's the years. Yeah. And it's at times I sort of say to myself, oh, you haven't done this for a long time. Or, oh, you're going to be teaching that. Oh, you better just really go back and look at that practice. It might be Surya Vedana, Chandra Vedana. It might be, it could be anything. Kumbhakas. I did a whole series on Mahamudra. I did a whole, the yogic Mahamudra. I did a whole series on Kumbhakas. The bandhas, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Galandhara Bandha. So sometimes I've done whole courses just specifically on that. And so, of course, before that, that's a lot of what my practice will be about. And then I let go of all that. So it's kind of very purpose, subject-wise. And then that course I've finished, it's over. And I find that I feel a little bit flat. It's after kind of like teaching, the energy of teaching and giving out. I feel a little bit flat for a couple of days. And then one morning in the practice, it's like, whoa, it's all there. It's all moved on somewhere. It's moved on a stage. It's like, and I didn't realize I had questions because the answers are coming. The connection. Yeah. So that's kind of how it goes.
Can I ask one more question, please?
Fine.
Yeah, it's just time. Can you say something about the awareness and developing awareness of the prana body as a result of practicing pranayama? About that?
Yeah. I think that there are key places when I began to realize this is not breathing. Like Prashant talks about Shvasayama and Pranayama, and in which Shvasayama is breathing exercises, the way of breathing. And Pranayama is prana. Prana is essential life in our body. And there is a kind of it's throughout our body. It's technically in terms of theory, it's got five major kind of categories in which it is manifest. But just essentially, what I find quite interesting for me was I began to recognize only a pathway for this was pain. Was I noticed that there is this state of the tanmatras called of shabda. Shabda is not what causes space. It is what is quality, what is present. What are the conditions for space to arise? And that is shabda or vibration. So vibration has a quality of expansion and contraction. And the thing with expansion and contraction is it's very present if ever you are in extreme pain. If you are in extreme pain, there's not much else you can pay attention to. It's part of my whole yoga thing was working with a lot of disability from injuries. And so in working in pain and working with pain, one of the things in which the kind of tragedy of the pain and the drama of the pain is not there, but you're really looking close into it. There is just expansion, contraction, expansion and contraction. I twigged that expansion and contraction, as I had recognized it in pain, was that I had recognized this. It was something and made the connection to that actually the first manifest of prana is with this very subtle vibration, which is a form of expansion, contraction. That is how I experience it. And often that I will use that, not so much contraction as being the loss of anything, but more the sense of expansion has to have a resolution. Yeah. So expansion and there's resolution. And so this is often how I will start to teach, especially in areas of kumbhaka, because you're no longer breathing. The breath is no longer coming or going. And yet there's still expansion and resolution.
Thank you.
It took pain to learn it. Actually. It's not a sad story. It was when I went, it was helpful, and down the path I had surgeries done, and that helped. I basically had my foot reconstructed. That helped.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no. Thank you for being so patient.
Yeah, it's okay. Hello, Stephanie. Thank you for a very nice and warm explanations of all your many years experience. I have a very practical question. Since you mentioned that you're kind of going to go a little bit deeper from a different angle in this course, I'm just wondering if you are intending to pick up the bandhas and explain a little bit more about especially Uddiyana and Mula Bandha.
No, we'll be doing kumbhakas, but not the bandhas. That would be for another course. Too much to try and too many lollies in the basket.
I
so to speak.
understand that. So do you have any plans to have these kind of courses in the near future? Because I'm really interested in to meet a teacher who is willing to kind of go a little bit more deeper into this.
Yeah.
Recorded courses or anything?
Yes. Yeah, I have recorded courses on my website, stephaniequirk.com.au. You have to put the A.
I have been on your website, but I didn't check everything. Do you have a specific courses where you kind of say in the name of the course that it is a course about bandhas or whatever? So I can find it.
No.
Okay.
I don't tend to name it that way.
Okay. So do you plan to have a new course soon with those thematics?
Yeah, they will be there. I'm working with groups of people who mostly students from overseas who I've obviously in the past traveled to and taught. Yes, I do Nadi Shodhana practice with it. I do the kumbhakas and the bandhas as part and parcel of it. But yeah, again, I go to the website. But there's also a plan with Agi, with the reading group, the group that is reading through Life on Pranayama. We do have a further plan that will definitely involve digital pranayama. We'll be mostly kind of caught up in doing that, or it'll be another 5 session, and we'll just see where things go. But yes, you can also go to my website. I've got a session coming up at the end of this month, which means every day for 5 days. And I'm then traveling in Asia. And when I come back from that trip, I want to do a once a week class, ongoing class. It's more of a practice, a support for people's practice. If they have a place to go to once a week, it helps them. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. And we will keep you posted regarding the possible May 5 sessions that we'll have.
Yeah.
So 2 questions in the Zoom. Anat asked if you can explain why did Guruji choose the particular mudra for the digital pranayama? Do you know the reason behind it? And And Natasha is asking about why should pranayama never be practiced alone in the afternoon or at night. Let me see if there are other questions.
Okay. And what was the first one? So, the mudra, the pranayama mudra. Yeah. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to the pranayama mudra. The important thing, when I kind of like really backtrack down why like that, there are photos somewhere of T. Krishnamacharya doing that particular mudra for pranayama practice, where the fingers are rolled in. There are other schools which will extend the fingers. Often they'll rest it on the forehead. The thing is that if you roll the ring, little, and thumb in order to put them on the nostril, but then have these other fingers extended out, it means that the ones that you're trying to roll to touch the nostrils have a tension in them because of this division between the middle finger and the ring finger is not an easy, fluid, dexterous one.
Mm.
In other words, if you move that middle finger, the ring finger wants to follow it. You can move the ring finger on your own, but if you extend that middle finger, the ring finger wants to straighten. So if you want to keep the ring finger curled around to equally come either side of the nostrils, in order that you don't harden and straighten that ring finger, it's better if you fold the others in because that will keep them in a rounded shape. The importance of keeping them in a rounded shape is because it's important that you touch the very tips, not this part. This part of our finger, if you touch that pad off your finger, it's quite tactile, it's quite sensitive, and you can feel the layer of skin directly in touch with a small amount of muscle underneath, right? Now, if you touch the very tip, very gently, you'll find it's as though there's skin and there's a little space, and then there's the flesh. And in that space is a possibility for shabda, vibration. It's quite different to touch those tips right on the edge there. There's this empty space under the skin. You can feel it. It's very subtle compared to just. That's why. So you've got to let yourself touch just the tips. You've got to be sure that that finger is not going to get straightened out because you got these ones straight. You're going to have to roll them in so it will stay in that rounded curve shape. Okay, that's the pranayama mudra. I think if I turn off I'll keep the sound on. So I use this image. It's actually an image from the Bodhisattva Tara in which she is touching exactly the tips of the fingers. She's holding the stem of a lotus and she's offering that lotus. So that's what the little twirly thing is between the fingers. So I choose that particular image because it is so close to the pranayama mudra, that touching of the tip of the fingers. So the bodhisattva only grasps a thing just in that very fine space. I haven't heard this one about not practicing here, there, or the other thing. I don't know that it's in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It could be. I think it gives some recommendations about when to practice. And I remember reading this with someone else, so I could be wrong. It could be the Garanda Samhita or the Shiva Samhita. It goes something like, it can be practiced at at dawn, and it can be practiced at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 11 o'clock in the morning, at midday, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's kind of like you can practice it all the time. That was from an original text, including nighttime. I think all of my 20 years of learning pranayama from Gita, they were nighttime classes. I tend to, having said that, I tend to practice my own pranayama in the morning. So I don't know what I don't know what else to say apart from that. It's one of those things. What is the criteria by which you can tell the maturity of a student being ready for pranayama practice? You just never end it. Just really can't, and in the end can't end it. So too was the times for practicing pranayama. There are some cautions about. I did once develop pneumonia, and I did mention to Gita once I got well enough to get back to the institute that does she think it was that when I had a fever that might have precipitated the pneumonia, because I had a fever. I turned up. I wanted to go to my pranayama class, and I had a fever. Did that cause my pneumonia? She nodded. Do not practice if you have a fever. Asana or pranayama. And there are, of course, all the cautions pertaining to food. I find that actually I can get away with a shorter time duration of eating maybe a piece of toast before practicing asana. I cannot do that with pranayama. And I think it's got something to do with the stages of digestion that you go through, even if it's just a piece of toast. What's going to happen is your whole digestive system has a rhythm, and that is going to be the strongest energy, samana vayu, happening in the body at the time. And that is problematic. I find food, proximity of when you've eaten, affects me more than actually an asana practice. So I wouldn't recommend going upside down shortly after eating a piece of toast. But it's to do with that rhythm of digestion that the body will go through.
Stephanie, I would like to thank you, and I invite others to open the mic and thank Stephanie as well. This was very insightful. And again, thank you for your generosity to share with us your insights and experience. And I'm
Thank you.
very looking much towards the course on this coming Tuesday.
Yeah. Yes.
So much,
So,
Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Agi, for organizing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Agni. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Rome.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Take care, Agni.
Thank you all.